Hello, everyone. Thank you, Rich. Yes, it's been a long time from my last presentation, and I'm honored to provide you with the latest updates on the Black Sea grain and oilseed markets. 3 years have passed since the war in Ukraine began. No one expected it to last this long, but Ukrainian people are very strong and brave and are not going to give up their land. Today, I'm going to analyze damages and losses done to Ukrainian economy and agricultural sector in particular during these 3 years. We will discuss Ukrainian grain and oilseed exports. We will summarize the results on grain production in 2024 and look at the prospects for 2025. We will compare world grain and oilseed prices with Ukrainian and Russian prices. And at the end, there is some bonus information about Russian grain and oilseed markets. So, according to the latest damage report prepared by the World Bank in cooperation with government of Ukraine, direct damage to Ukrainian economy and infrastructure estimates about $176 billion, and it grows as Russia continues to send missiles every day. The most affected sectors are housing, around 33% of total damage, transportation, which is around 21%, energy and extractives, about 12%, and commerce and industry around 10%. The damage in the agricultural sector amounts to $11.2 billion or 6.4% of total. At the same time, we could probably count also related to agricultural sector, such as, for example, irrigation and water resources and environment and forestry, which add additional $2.4 billion. According to the breakdown of damages done to agricultural sector, machineries and equipment damage account for the largest share, 58%, followed by destroyed storage facilities, around 17% of those $11.2 billion, and also stolen inputs and outputs, also around 17%. The damage in agricultural sector also includes the destruction of fisheries and aquaculture, perennial crops, as well as the forced slaughter of livestock. The highest damage values were recorded in the occupied areas and areas that are close to front line, like Luhansk, Zaporizhia, Kherson, collectively represented 65% of total damage to infrastructure. Aggregate economic, social, and other monetary losses of the Ukrainian economy total about $589 billion, and it significantly exceeds assets damage. Loss is dominated in commerce and industry, 36% of total loss, followed by actually agriculture, 12% of total, energy and extractives, also 12%, transport, 8%, and explosive hazard management, 5%. The indirect losses in agricultural sector amounts, as you see, $72.7 billion. And this includes loss of farm income due to lower of foregone production, lower farm gate prices due to export logistic disruption, higher farm production costs due to higher prices of fertilizers and fuel, the cost of land recultivation after demining, the halt of efficient operation, and the cost of debris removal from destroyed agricultural storage facilities. The largest loss, accounting for 51% of the total losses, is attributed to the decrease in annual crop production. The loss caused by the decrease in farm gate prices of export-oriented commodities such as wheat, barley, corn, and oilseeds is accounting for 34% of this $72.7 billion. Other significant losses include high input cost, 6%, lower livestock production, excuse me, around 5%, lower perennial crop production around 2%, and again, occupied and areas that are close to front line are damaged, suffer from all damage and losses the most, especially Khersonska, Zaporizhia, Kharkiv, and Donetsk Oblast. So the total estimated recovery and reconstruction needs across the public and private sectors amount to about $524 billion for the next 10 years. The highest estimated needs is, of course, in housing, around 16% of the total. This followed by transport, 15%, energy and extractive, 13%, commerce and industry, 12%, agriculture is here around 11%, social protection and social protection around 7%, and explosive hazard management around 6%. This cost consider building back better principle, including a shift toward lower energy intensity and adoption of modern standards, including for climate resilience and inclusive design, as well as inflation, market conditions, surge pricing in construction, and high insurance premium. Talking about agriculture, the total recovery and reconstruction needs in the agricultural sector are estimated for over $55.5 billion for over 10 years, next 10 years. To ensure that agricultural sector recovers, drives the overall economic recovery, serves as a decent income source for farmers and rural population, and provides food for Ukrainian population and also to other nations. Several investments are especially important. This includes investments to address liquidity constraints, promote resilience to disasters and climate change, support integral food energy system, and strengthen the agricultural public institutions to efficiently support recovery and reconstruction. But of course, the most immediate, that is replacing and rebuilding damaged facilities and reconstruction of all damaged assets while accommodating this build back better principle. So another area is supporting the sector's long-term recovery and sustainable development by advancing diversification and inclusiveness, efficient value chain, climate resilience, and social sustainability of rural areas, and also scaling up investment in agricultural public institutions to promote evidence-based policy making on agriculture and rural development, which includes agricultural services such as sanitary and phytosanitary measures, food safety, land monitoring and registration, soil testing, agricultural research and extension services, training, retraining of farmers and staff for agribusiness. The recovery of sector has already begun with estimated, as you can see, $873 million in needs addressed through state funding and donor support between 2022 and 2024. In recent years, the largest share of public and donor financing has been allocated to interest rate compensation program, around 49%, and grant supporting agricultural production by small farmers, around 22%. I didn't plan on this slide, but I saw several questions regarding demining and restoration of land at your registration. So I added this slide to respond those questions ahead. So the question was how much the land is mined and how was demined, especially on agricultural land. So as you know, around 17.4 million hectares of Ukrainian territory were affected by war. So far, 3.5 million hectares were cleared. That is both through the mining and also technical, non-technical survey. And this happened mainly, as you can see, on liberated areas. This is the latest map from National Mine Action Center. I just copied that yesterday. Unfortunately, nobody knows what's going on occupied territories. That is why we cannot tell what was demined there. Potentially all over Ukraine, around 6 million hectares of agricultural land needed to be checked, cleared, or surveyed. In 2024, around 300,000 hectares were cleared and returned to cultivation. Last year, it was 274 cleared hectares that returned to cultivation, cleared and returned to cultivation. So actually, Ukrainian government has implemented a national mine action strategy to demine critical areas, and by the end of 2024, there were over 200 mechanical demining machines on the field, manufactured both in Ukraine and also brought by international partners. Last numbers that I know, that 73 mine action operators have been certified. One of the biggest is actually Highland Trust, which works with in collaboration with Howard Buffett Foundation. Totally, almost 5.5 thousand specialists currently conducting demining in Ukraine. However, it's gonna be long, dangerous, and expensive project because currently Ukraine is the most mined country in the world. To speed up the process, in September 2024, government of Ukraine introduced 100% compensation for humanitarian demining cost for farmers. So what farmers need to do, they need to apply through the state agrarian register, and then humanitarian demining center check the documents and estimate the cost of demining. And after the bidding process, center informs the farmer about operator assigned to perform the work, and then the certified mine action operator demines the designated area. Of course, it happens that farmers go on their field and try to do this on their own, and it happens that we have casualties from this, and we encourage farmers to wait till professionals will come to their field and clean their field. So let's return to production and export, and I want to emphasize that role of Ukraine in the world agricultural market is significant, and despite all the destruction and everyday danger, Ukraine keeps its leading position on number of agricultural markets. Ukraine still remains #1 in the sunflower oil and meal markets, although Russia became first in their production due to harvesting on the occupied Ukrainian regions, which mainly specialize on the production on sunflower and winter wheat. Ukraine was third in the world in terms of rapeseed export, fourth on corn, fifth on barley, and sixth on wheat and soybean export. In 2024, almost 57% of Ukrainian agricultural export went to Europe, mainly Spain, Netherlands, Poland, and Germany, which is significantly higher compared to the pre-war level. Although in dollar amount, it increased, the share of Europe decreased for 2% compared to 2023. Ukraine experiences significant gradual decline of agricultural export to Asia, mainly because of China. If in 2021 export to Asia amounted $5.4 billion or 19%, in 2023 it was $2 billion or 12%. Then in 2024 it was just $1.8 billion or just 7.3%. At the same time, Ukraine regains its position in the African and South Asia markets, the share of which increased in 2024 compared to 2023 from 7 to 10.6% and from 4 to 9% respectively, although it's still lower than in the pre-war time. Agricultural export remains the main source of agrarian budget and overall budget of Ukraine. In 2024, the share of earnings from agricultural export in total exports amounted 60%. Moreover, grain export is the major driver of Ukrainian economy and Ukrainian agriculture, composing over 38% of total export, 38% of agricultural export, and over 22% of total export revenue. Considering the importance of grain and oilseed export for Ukraine and the world in general, supporting the agricultural sector in Ukraine is a priority task for ensuring food security. The marketing year 23-24 characterized by fairly high export, which is associated with relatively high initial stocks and extremely favorable weather conditions in 2023, which allowed farmers to harvest higher yields compared to even the pre-war period. So 3 months left to the end of 24-25 grain marketing year. So we can kind of compare where we are, and we still behind. If we would compare this year to previous year, we are behind the same period on previous year. So far, we exported 32.4 million tons of grain and legumes, including this 3.2 billion tons in March 2025. Regarding oil commodities and byproducts, so far, Ukraine exported fewer sunflower seeds, sun oil, and rapeseed. Lower export is related to the lower crop production in 2024. Soybean export showing growing trend over last years, and we expect the higher export in this marketing year compared to previous year. As you can see, it's getting pretty good already. So this graph clearly demonstrates how lower export of major commodities from Ukraine in volume terms this year compared to previous year, 23 or 24. Since October 2024, corn again dominate among other commodities, followed by wheat, sunflower oil, and cake, and soybeans. For 3 years of the war, Ukraine exported over 183 million tons of grain, oilseeds, and byproducts, which in average over 60 million tons export capacity a year. By transportation mode, Black Sea ports dominates currently since the opening of Ukrainian humanitarian corridor. It is not here on slide, unfortunately, but in March, Black Sea port transshipped 4.1 million tons of grain. That is bigger than previous months. The share, what I want to point here, that the share of the new pre-war ports significantly decreased, and in March it was just 183,000 metric tons. As you can see, at some point when Black Sea ports were closed, the new pre-war ports were able to export over 2.2 million metric tons of grain and oil seeds. So this decrease is explained by more complicated and expensive logistics to and from the new river ports compared to Black Sea ports. So that is why now when farmers have choice and traders have choice, they would rather go through Black Sea ports as they can load bigger vessels and transportation to Black Sea ports is easier. Around 300,000 tons were exported by railway in March. Actually, railway plays a very important role, not only for direct exports through land borders to Europe, but also for transporting grain to ports for further export. In 2024, actually, Ukrainian railway transported the second after 2019 record for the last 10 years amount of grain and of grain for export. That was almost 40 million tons, 39.7, including 29.2 million tons transported to ports for further export and 4.9 to land borders. So the railway transshipment through land borders decreased almost twice, from 8.4 million tons in 2023, but it is still significantly higher compared to pre-war usage of this type of transportation. In 2021, before the war, it was around 500, 600,000 tons a year. I'm not going to compare in details how much geographical structure of grain and oilseed export has changed from the pre-war level, as I did it in my previous webinars. As I mentioned earlier, export to Europe increased dramatically, but remember that it is very often goes for re-export of food processing and then also partially for re-export after processing. Ukrainian traders have adapted to the conditions they have to deal with on everyday basis, and of course every day can be different after another missile strike. So I just want to show how geographical structure is changing during the war period, this marketing year compared to the previous year, and of course with returning Black Sea ports to operation, export destination are becoming more diverse. In general, as you see, grain export to top exporters so far in current marketing year lower compared to the same period in 23-24 marketing year, which is in darker blue. Spain remains the leader. However, they bought 3 million tons of grain less so far. China dramatically decreased its grain purchase from Ukraine, mainly corn, which is now comes from Brazil to China. At the same time, Turkey and Indonesia already bought more grain than they bought totally in 23-24 marketing year. Algeria, which was one of the big buyer of grain from Ukraine before the war, again on Ukraine's market, along with South Korea and Thailand. Let's take a look on major commodities. Wheat. Spain again is the leader. Also before the war, it was Indonesia, Egypt, Pakistan, Bangladesh. In 2022-23, Indonesia was trying to buy more from Russia actually, but for the last two seasons, their wheat import is pretty stable from Ukraine, and they already bought more than last year. Again, Algeria is significantly increasing their purchase from Ukraine, switching back from Russia. This can be also connected to the fact that Russia introduced export quotas of 10.6 million tons of wheat from February 15 till June 30 of 2025. That means that their export can be down to 40, maybe 41 million tons this marketing year. So a country started to search for alternative sources. Turkey significantly decreased their wheat import from Ukraine. So far, it is only 38,000 tons. At the same time, we can see Thailand, Yemen, Portugal, New Zealand, Morocco, Malaysia, who bought more already than they bought last year from Ukraine. Turkey bought much less wheat, but became a leader so far on corn import from Ukraine. They already bought almost 3 million tons. China bought so far only 128,000 tons of corn from Ukraine. Just a reminder that before the war, China was a major importer of Ukrainian corn, buying around 9 million tons a year. Spain decreased their corn import from Ukraine twice compared to the same period in last marketing year. At the same time, South Korea, Belgium, Greece already bought more than they had last year. India joined Ukrainian market in 2023 after the break since 2019 and has been steadily increasing its corn import from Ukraine. I also would like to cover a little bit situation with production and export of grain byproducts in Ukraine. Since the beginning of the war, we can observe a reduction in flour production from 3 million tons in 2021 to 2.34 million tons in 23 and 24. Among the main reasons are damage to processing plants, power outages, and disruption in logistics. Flour and bran exports are also much lower compared to pre-war levels. However, it was an increase in 2023 due to higher ending stocks in 2022 when seaports were blocked. It is extremely important for Ukraine and for Ukrainian agricultural sector to reconstruct and develop processing industry to produce and export more higher value products like wheat flour. This will bring additional revenue, obviously, to the budget and create additional jobs and generate consistently greater demand for wheat domestically. In 2024, 40% of Ukrainian flour went to Europe, 30% to Moldova, 15% to Palestine, and 6.8% to Israel. The major buyer of bran is Turkey. Its share is almost 64%, which is used for their livestock. Actually, Turkey is the second largest after China importer of bran in the world. Over 21% of bran from Ukraine were exported to Europe, over 14% to Middle East countries such Israel, Iraq, and Morocco. Just for comparison, Russia is significantly increasing wheat flour exports since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. If in 2021 Russia exported around 260,000 tons of wheat flour, then in 2022 this increased to 880,000 tons. In 2023 to over 1.1 million tons, and in 2024 to 1.3 million tons. So it increased 5 times, and they continue to increase the not only wheat export, but also orient more on the wheat flour production, processing, and export. So on oilseed market, we are way behind on oilseed and byproducts export this marketing year compared to the previous one. Also, the list of top 15 buyers is pretty much the same. They just moved a little bit. Majority of them decreased import of oilseeds and byproducts from Ukraine. The biggest drop is from Romania, from over 2 million tons in 23-24 marketing year to 415,000 tons so far. Egypt and China have also significantly decreased their purchase from Ukraine. At the same time, Belgium has almost completed their last year purchase, and Pakistan has increased its oilseed import from Ukraine by 16 times. Ukraine is the largest exporter in the world of sunflower oil. That's why I would like to talk a little bit about this. Ukraine sells sunflower oil to over 130 countries in the world, including actually the US. 27,000 tons of sunflower oil was bought by the US in 2024. Of course, sunflower production suffers from the same issues as flour production, which consequently leads to the reduction of its export. Prior to the war, China and India were the major importers of Ukrainian sunflower oil, buying around 4.3 and 3.2 million tons respectively in the 2021 marketing year. So far, in this marketing year, China bought only 22,000 tons of sunflower oil. Romania, Turkey, and Spain have significantly increased their purchase of sunflower oil from Ukraine, temporarily acting as alternative routes. They have bought a little this marketing year and will most likely not increase their purchase as much as last marketing year. On the soybean and rapeseed markets, top importers of Ukrainian oilseeds are pretty much the same in this marketing year compared to the previous. Mostly European countries are on the list. Turkey is a leader, buying almost a quarter of Ukrainian soybeans, followed by Egypt, New Zealand, and Pakistan. Malta and Algeria are new players on the Ukrainian soybean markets. As far as I can remember, they didn't buy soybeans from Ukraine. I'm sure with further increase of soybean production in Ukraine, we will see more new buyers from Ukraine. New countries will appear on the list. Around 75% of Ukrainian rapeseed exported were directed to Belgium, Germany, and United Kingdom. Europe uses Ukrainian rapeseeds mainly for biofuel production, so we expect that this market gonna be pretty stable. So if we will take a look not on marketing year but calendar year, in 2024, Ukraine exported totally around 61.6 million tons of grain and oilseeds. Obviously, Ukraine was selling stocks from the previous 2023 years, so even with lower production in 2024, which was around 73.6 million tons, Ukraine reached a sufficient level of export. In 2025, Ukraine's grain and oilseed export is expected at 57.6 million tons, considering lower production in 2024 and lower initial stocks. However, Ukraine is pretty optimistic about the grain and oilseeds production in 2025, expecting to harvest at least 80 million tons, including around 60 million tons of grain. So I guess I'm gonna stop a little bit on this as we have several questions summarizing the export, and then we'll go to the production.
Yeah, there's one question in the chat, and I would encourage people that are in the audience, if they have questions on the damage or the exports, go ahead and put those in the chat session at this point in time. But the question from Vince, are exports down today versus early 2024 due to just less production declines given the war conditions? Is that one of the reasons you would suspect exports are down?
So the export is lower, obviously, due to lower production, and it's not so much due to logistics today because grain corridor is pretty much secure unless Russia will send another missile strike to Odessa ports. But we are doing pretty well now with exporting. So yes, lower production, lower export. That is a consequence mainly from the lower production.
And so your thoughts, just kind of to continue this, is that logistics is not a big issue of getting grain out of Ukraine at this point in time. It's just demand from the world and then production in Ukraine to meet that demand.
Right. So logistic is still let's be honest, right? Logistic is still complicated and expensive, but compared to the beginning of the war in 2022, where logistic was blocked, right? So today's logistic is much easier than 2 years ago.
And you may cover this a little bit later, but at what you indicated that logistics were pretty expensive. Are they still expensive, or has the cost of logistics come down maybe from what it was a year or two ago?
Yes, the cost of logistics came down, obviously, because when you operate through big ports, you can load, first of all, bigger vessels, so this decrease your cost per ton, but also transportation to the ports is also getting cheaper. So recently, actually, Ukrainian railway reduced the cost of usage of those wagons for grain, so which really help farmers to get bigger revenue. So, and also logistic, it was a lot of tracks were repaired and a lot of roads were repaired. Another bridge that was damaged was Nisensky to Port Pivdeny was repaired. So it increased capacity of transportation to the port, so it helps. And kind of players on a logistics adjusted to the situation. Several dry ports were built on the border with Europe. So there are several alternatives how to get grain out of Ukraine, including Danube rivers and also railway and Black Sea port. So so far, I would say that logistics is pretty stable, and yes, it is cheaper now than it was at the beginning of the war.
There's a question from Carrie regarding insurance. Has insurance costs with regards to the vessel insurance rates, have they stayed high or have they come down over the last year or so?
If we will compare today's prices, and I cannot tell you right ahead the prices, but what I know the trend that compared to the insurance a year ago when we just opened the grain corridor, humanitarian corridor, the price of insurance was much higher than it is today. And first of all, this is related to how secure the freight and how secure the route, when you move your vessel from Ukrainian port to other ports, right? Turkey or Constanza or whatever port. So yes, insurance is cheaper now a little bit, so it also reduces the cost.
And then one of the other big logistics costs is diesel fuel or fuel. Has that come down? I know at one point that was, I think I had heard diesel was about $10 per gallon roughly.
Yeah, at the beginning of the war, that was horrible situation. That was very limited supply. And also very high prices due to high demand. But yes, with opening Odessa ports, so they work back and forth, right? When you export grain, then you bring back fuel, fertilizers, and some other stuff that needed for Ukraine. So yes, since opening ports, big Odessa ports, and since they operate more secure, the prices for fuel went down as well. They are still more expensive than in the US, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
Any other questions before we kind of move on to the production situation, finishing up 2024 and looking at 2025? If not, we'll turn it back to Antonina and she will talk about the production system coming up.
Yes. So looks like we don't have questions so far. So let's talk a little bit about production, where we are now and what are the expectations. So in 2024, Ukraine harvested around 10.9 million hectares of grain and legumes, including 4.9 million hectares of wheat, 1.4 million hectares of barley, 3.8 million hectares of corn. Of course, due to the loss of the territories and damage from the war to agricultural land, this is much less than in 2021, or over 31%. At the same time, the structure of crops has changed as farmers were switching from those that bring more losses, like corn, to those that bring less losses, or at least some profit, like soybeans. As a result, we can observe significant increase here in soybean area, which was doubled in 2024 compared to 2021. There was also increase in rapeseed area by 26% compared to pre-war level, and also in 2024 it's unfortunately a little bit lower than in 2023, but it's still pretty high. So in 2024, Ukraine was actually able to harvest 22.4 million tons of wheat, which is higher than in 2022 and 2023. Regions that are controlled by Ukrainian government started to reorganize the structure of their crops and increase areas under wheat almost all over Ukraine. In 2021, as you can see, Kharkiv Oblast was the leader, producing over 2.8 million tons of wheat, following by Zaporizhia, 2.7 million ton, Odessa, 2.6 million ton, Dnipropetrovsk, 2.5, Kherson, 2.1, Mykolaiv, 2 million tons. So wartime production in this oblast are much lower due to occupation and current or past active military hostilities. If we sum up the southeastern wheat belt of Ukraine, its production in 2021 was 17.4 million tons, but only 7.9 those mentioned regions produced in 2024. So technically, Ukraine lost almost 10 million tons of production potential, of wheat production potential, which actually partially now used by Russia. Although other regions of Ukraine are trying to increase wheat production, it is difficult for them to compensate lost potential. The only what we can see that Odessa Oblast has become a leader in wheat production, and from the point of view of logistics, this is one of the most convenient region for growing agricultural crops due to its proximity to Black Sea ports. In 2023, despite the lower rate of fertilizer application, Ukraine had a historical record average yield of 4.64 tons per hectare due to favorable weather conditions that allowed growers to harvest higher wheat harvest than in 2022. In 2024, wheat yields were lower than in previous year, but were significantly higher than in 2022. So you can see that was 393 and then 453. However, the larger planted area helped to produce more wheat. In 2025, wheat area is estimated at 4.61 million hectares. Expectations for wheat production in Ukraine in 2025 vary widely so far, from pessimistic 16.2 million tons, which were declared by Minister of Agricultural Policy earlier, to more optimistic from other Ukrainian experts, from 21 million ton to 22.5 million tons. With lower sown area, to get bigger production, we would need to have higher yield that we had in 2024, which is pretty questionable as farming conditions are not improving and fertilizer application continues to be lower than optimal norms, and also the winter was not so snowy, so we didn't get enough moisture for higher yields. A reduction in corn acreage has been observed in the most regions of Ukraine since the beginning of the war. Besides loss of the territory, another reason for such reduction is high financial losses from corn that moved farmers towards switching from corn to more profitable oilseed crops due to lower input cost. As a result, corn production decreased by 18 million tons in 2024 compared to 2021. And this trend was observed all over Ukraine, even in a leading this Chernihiv and Poltava region. So you can see how lighter colors now on the map all over region of Ukraine. So if in 2021, Ukraine had almost 5.5 million hectares of corn, in 2024, it was only 3.8 million hectares. With stabilization of Black Sea ports and increase of prices for Ukrainian grain in the world market, corn production getting more efficient. So some farmers are returning to its production, but it's still one of the least profitable crops. According to Ministry of Agrarian Policy, in 2025, Ukraine expects to plant 4.15 million hectares of corn. However, it can be corrected after the check of all winter crops, as farmers could decide to resow some areas. Some experts declared the area can increase to 4.6 million hectares and corn production to over 29 million tons in 2025. However, due to the lack of moisture in the soil from low snowfall, yields are going more likely to be lower than in 2024, which with larger area will allow Ukraine to harvest around the same amount of corn in 2025 as in 2024. With the negative trend in yields, only farmers with high crop productivity will continue to remain in corn industry, and farmers who have low productivity will likely reduce their corn production again, switching to other crops with higher economic return. Total harvest of barley in 2024 was around 5.5 million of tons, 4 million tons less than in 2021. The estimates for 2025 is even lower, around 5.1 million tons. We observed significant decrease in barley area, which actually started over 1 year ago. China was earlier the major buyer of barley from Ukraine, and it still is. But if in 2021 marketing year, China imported 2.9 million tons of barley, in 23-24, it was just 660,000 tons. With change of the demand, Ukraine revised production necessity for barley, so we can see this reduction. Sunflower production in Ukraine decreased from 16.4 million tons in 2021 to 10.2 million tons in 2024. This reduction is mainly due to reduction in sown area and loss of territories, obviously. We can observe reduction on sunflower production all over Ukraine, especially in occupied and close to the frontline areas. For 2025, there is more optimistic forecast estimating 11.5 million tons following increase in area and yields. In 2023, Ukraine had a record production of rapeseed equal to 4.2 million tons due to increase in both areas and yields. In 2024, the harvest was the harvest declined. Also, it was still higher than any other pre-war level. For 2025, gradual decrease is expected to 3.2 million tons in production volume. Planting area is estimated at 1.17 million hectares. The geographical structure of rapeseed production also has changed. Now we can see Vinnytsia Oblast, where I'm from, became a leader, almost doubling its production, followed by Khmelnytsky and Ternopil Oblast. Soybean production is the most dynamic. We can see how darker many regions are now in the map. In 2024, Ukraine harvested record 6 million tons of soybeans and had the largest ever soy area of 2.66 million hectares. For the 2025, the forecast is still optimistic, 5.8 million tons. Also, southern area is expected to be 20,000 hectares low, but still pretty high. If global demand for Ukrainian soybean grows, its production will follow a positive trend, and Ukraine will continue to increase soybean production, especially considering that it's cheaper in terms of inputs. So spring sowing campaign is in progress, and its result obviously depends from that how winter crops survive through the winter. Some farmers could decide to resow some fields. This year's results of overwintering winter grain crops turned out to be quite good, and in many ways encouraging, since the number of plants lost during the winter period, with minor exception, was no more than 4 to 6%, which is quite normal. However, due to the lower precipitation, the amount of moisture of the winter period is significantly lower compared to the average multi-year norm, which is necessary for the time of renewal of spring vegetation by winter crop. And this means that we will not be able to to get further higher yields. So it's kind of expected that yield gonna be lower this year than last year. The final numbers for winter crops total that were sown 6.15 million hectares. Including 4.4 million hectares of winter wheat and almost 1.1 million hectares of winter rapeseed. Ministry of Agrarian Policy of Ukraine is expecting to plant around 5.7 million hectares of spring cereal crops, including 227,000 hectares of spring wheat, which is higher than ever, but obviously it cannot compensate the significant loss of winter wheat production. But at least it can boost wheat production a little. It is expected further reduction in spring barley areas. As of April 11, Ukraine planted 62% of spring wheat, as you can see, 77% of barley, 66% of oats, and 84% of peas. The rest of crop sowing campaign is just started, so we'll see how it goes, and of course we will adjust our forecast as soon as we know the real plant sowing area, just not the expected. So, of course, it is still too early to make preliminary estimates of production and export for 25-26. But here is the first try of Ukrainian experts for grain balance. And in the next slide, this is one for grain, and next slide is going to be for oilseeds in Ukraine. So you will have my slides, so you can learn this later. The only what I want to point that the gross harvest is expected pretty much the same as I mentioned, 57.6. million tons, with following export of 42.6 million tons. 24-25 is expected to be over with pretty low export, 38.2 million tons of grain, which is significantly lower compared to the previous year. Regarding oilseeds, increase in harvested area and gross harvest is expected in 2025. However, export of oilseeds in 25-26 can be slightly lower. It's actually, yeah, it's slightly higher, sorry. But we will see how it will happen. With this, actually, harvest gonna be higher, but the export gonna be lower. And the reason for this that Ukraine is trying to renew and increase processing capacity. So we expect that we would process more and sell as a sunflower oil, which will give us additional revenue to budget. That is why also the export of oilseeds will be lower. So now let's take a look. Let's take a look on prices and what are the prices now for Ukraine. As you remember, the biggest spike in wheat prices were observed when Russia terminated grain initiative. Currently, prices are higher than a year ago, in average for $30 per ton. Since opening Ukrainian humanitarian corridor, prices for grain from Ukraine increased, which gives hope for farmers for higher profitability. The average price for milling wheat from Ukraine last week was $249 per ton, from Russia $251 per ton. The cheapest now is American wheat, $224 per ton. Price for feed wheat from Ukraine leveled with the price from Russia, around $240 per ton. Corn prices have tendency to grow. Currently, it is $45–50 more expensive than a year ago. If you remember, during the period of full-scale invasion, Ukrainian corn was the cheapest, but since last July, is the most expensive on the market. Recently, it was traded in average for $243 per ton, while from the US just for $224 per ton. On barley market, Ukrainian barley again is more expensive. Now it's $238 per ton, and Russian is around $216 per ton. Ukrainian export of sunflower seeds is very low, so sunflower oil is more important. European Union traditionally has the highest price for sunflower oil, but again, they buy a lot also from Ukraine and then re-export. Sunflower oil was traded, Ukrainian sunflower oil was traded for $1,135 per ton, which is $80 lower than European. Sunflower meal from Ukraine was traded for $225 to $230 per ton. On soybean markets, although that is different basis, Ukrainian soy is cheaper than the from other major competitors. So now let's take a quick look on the situation with crop production and export in Russia. I'm not sure about the reason for this, but what I could see that they've changed some statistics for 2022, but it is what it is. So I updated my data. They can be different from my previous presentation, as they Russian Statistics Service changed their statistics. Russia reported almost 126 million tons of grain and legumes produced totally in 2024. And Russian Ministry of Agriculture early estimated only 123 million tons of grain to be harvested in 2025, including 77.4 million tons of wheat. I also saw more optimistic forecasts from Russian experts, which declared 130 million tons of grain and legumes in 2025, including 85 million tons of wheat, and even up to 145 million tons, which can be real only with including harvest from occupied Ukrainian territory. With lower grain production and in Ukraine, the export gonna be lower. Now it's projected for 45 million tons in 2025, including around 40 million tons of wheat. But also remember that Russia introduced those export quota until the end of June, that is 10.6 million tons. So this kind of will reduce 2025 export from Russia. Corn produced in Russia is mainly used for domestic consumption. In 2024, they produced 14 million tons as yield were low due to drought. In 2025 is expected around 14.6 million tons of corn. Barley in Russia occupies larger territories than corn, although we can observe reduction in sown area, it's still big. In 2024, Russia harvested 16.7 million tons of barley and expecting higher actually production in 2025, around 17.7 million tons. In 2024, Russia also produced 3 million tons of oats. We can observe reduction in its area and harvest. Buckwheat is also very popular cereal in Eastern Europe. I honestly miss it in the US. So in 2024, Russia produced around 1.2 million tons of buckwheat. There is also some rice production in Russia. In 2024, it was harvested almost 1.3 million tons. The forecast for the next year, it's pretty similar compared to this year. So here I also have the first try to predict grain balance in Russia for 25-26 marketing year. The gross harvest is a little higher than previously pessimistic scenario I announced, around 124.5 million tons. But this but with higher domestic consumption, it gives around just 43.5 million tons of grain export, pretty close to those 45 that I mentioned. We can see that ending stocks remain pretty high. And actually, this slide shows the ending stocks that are held by agricultural enterprise in Russia. And we can see that in 24-25, they are getting lower compared to 23 and 24, but still higher than pre-war level. And just to avoid any speculation on this issue, I would like to emphasize one more time that there are any sanctions on grain export from Russia to ensure global food security. So that is not because of sanctions. That is mainly because they had grain from occupied areas that was harvested or stolen, whatever, and it was hard to sell that grain. There is also, by the way, there is no sanctions on fertilizer export from Russia. Actually, if you are curious, according to the United Nations database in 2024, United States imported fertilizers from Russia on $1.3 billion, around 16% of all imported by the US fertilizers. And actually, Russia is second largest after Canada exporter of fertilizers to the US, just for information. So the stocks that we observed in 23 and 24 are getting lower, and by the end of 25, I believe it will be on the level of the pre-war year. In terms of oil crops, Russia is expecting further increase in production, mainly due to higher sunflower production. In 2024, Russia harvested almost 30.2 million tons of oilseeds, and next year estimates at 32.8 million tons. Moreover, in 2026, they hope to increase oil crop production to 35.2 million tons. Remember that occupied Ukrainian territories were producing over 3 million tons of sunflower seeds a year, so exploiting this potential makes this forecast pretty realistic. In 2024, Russia harvested 16.9 million tons of sunflower seeds, and in 2025, they expect 18.2 million tons. So regarding soybeans, 6 years ago, Russia started the program aimed to increase soybean production and ensure its self-sufficiency for livestock needs. 7 million tons, that is what they got in 2024, and that is actually fully satisfied this goal. In 2025, they expect to get 7.7 million tons, so we can expect that Russia will supply more soybeans to the world market. Rapeseed production in 2024 was over 4.6 million tons. We see how rapeseed production increased in Russia since full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and we can assume that that is not without the use of occupied territories. In 2025, Russia planned to harvest 5.1 million tons of rapeseed. With higher oilseed production in Russia, we can expect higher export next marketing year, but also Russia is trying to get over Ukraine on production and export of sunflower oil. So we can expect higher processing of sunflower seeds, and then also export can be higher due to bigger soybean production. So this is the first try also to predict balance for oilseeds in Russia, and of course it will be adjusted as we will know real areas that were planted and situation. So if we will take a quick look on ending stocks in 2025 currently, so it's very close to what they have in April 2022, but it's still higher than before the war. But they are decreasing, and Russia is trying to sell more and more oil seeds and also sunflower oil. So summarizing the situation on grain markets, I would like to compare share of major players of wheat and corn export in the world and look again on Ukraine and Russia. So that is according to the latest USDA-USD report. So we can see that 23-24 was pretty successful for Russia. They exported 55.5 million tons. Then for this year, the biggest what they can expect, 44 million tons of export, and their share on the market decreasing from the quarter to 21%. And here we can see that US is getting more of the market as prices are lower for American wheat and corn. So, and here it's Ukraine. The share of Ukraine is a little bit lower, but we are still important players on the wheat market. And on the corn market, as I mentioned, Russia is not the biggest player, and Ukraine is still hold the fourth position, although our share decreased. So we had 15% last year, and this year we are expecting to have a little less. 11.7. But we can see also how US production increased and Brazil this year, so that would compensate some decrease in Ukrainian production and export. So this is the latest interpretation of the Oilseed report, but I'm sure that Dan O'Brien will talk very soon about this when you will listen to his webinar about latest updates on grain markets in the US and the world. So thank you so much. This is what I wanted to share today. Probably a lot of information, but if you have any additional questions, and I see already some questions, I'm happy to answer.
We'll go through these. The first one is from Dan, basically looking at corn and the ability to secure fertilizer. Is that a big issue in 2025 for the crop in terms of securing fertilizer into the country to produce corn?
You mean in Ukraine?
Yes.
Situation with fertilizer is getting better. And I recently also listened to some presentation of the experts in fertilizer markets. So situation with fertilizer is kind of getting better as, again, the supports were opened and we are sending grain and bringing back fertilizers. So it's getting cheaper and also it's more accessible. So yes, situation with fertilizer is getting better, but it's still, in terms of corn, it's not only about fertilizers why the production is getting lower. There are a lot of other aspects also related to this, not only fertilizers. So with lower rates of fertilization, like from year to year, if your yields, like soil is, you are losing your soil fertility, right? Even in 1 year, you cannot reproduce with fertilizers what was lost. So getting fertilizers cheaper and more accessible, yes, will help to improve corn production and reduce maybe cost per ton, but we will need more maybe support in getting fertilizers for farmers, especially for small farmers, maybe additional subsidies and other type of support to make this more affordable for farmers. So I don't know.
The next question from Matthew. Any overall outlook from Ukraine due to the change in the U.S. Administration? A loaded question.
I think the Ukrainian administration Ukrainian government is going to work with any U.S. administration, since that is American people choice, right? And we still hope that American is our friend and we will win this war. This is the goal.
And then any comments on your family? How are they doing?
Doing better. My daughter is freshman at K-State.
And then your family in Ukraine, are they doing okay?
Yeah, every day is different, unfortunately. And we just observed those terrible missile strikes in Kryvyi Rih on the children's playground, and then next strike in Sumy, where so many people were killed on the main square for nothing. So they are relatively okay, but every day is different. Who knows?
Yep. And then in one of your first webinars, you indicated that there was quite a bit of loss of grain storage facilities in major production areas. Have there been gains in infrastructure, or has that been pretty much on hold, repairing some of the infrastructure that was damaged with regards to grain storage?
So yes and no. So first of all, many investors, especially international donors, were not open to invest into rebuilding or building new storage facilities, because that is obviously easy target, right? And it's easy to damage. So mainly what we were getting from international donors, that was those plastic sleeves to store grain, but obviously that is temporary solution and you cannot reuse them, right? So at the same time, in some region, new storage facilities were added, especially more close to the western border with the European Union, and also more close to the ports. So there are some new storage facilities and also several dry ports. Actually, Howard Buffett Foundation were involved in building one of those dry ports on a border with European Union. And also, with reduced production, we don't need maybe so many storage facilities. At the beginning of the war, we had very high ending stocks, and then new harvest came, so that was a crisis with storage facilities. Now we kind of learned how to manage this, let's say, and of course those plastic sleeves helps. But again, that is very temporary solution. So each year you need to get new one. So obviously after the war is over, we will need to rebuild or add some new storage facilities in the places where they are needed and were damaged.
Thanks. And then there was a question from Forrest with regards to how has the war affected egg statistics services in Ukraine? Do you have confidence in the statistics, or because of the wartime, are they maybe more difficult to get that information?
So, of course, it's difficult to get information, especially in the regions which are close to the front line, right? Because it's dangerous, and not always, even by phone, farmers would respond and report what is going on. And we are not talking only about agricultural statistics in general. But as you can see, many statistics, I always do those comments, notes on my slides that it can be updated. And I check statistics every day, working with what I'm doing, right? So then I see how it's updated. So sometimes some indicators can be less, sometimes some indicators can be higher. And that is because they clean information with getting more relevant data and more correct data. So that is why the statistics from 2022 to today obviously can be updated and changed. And also sometimes you can observe, even on my slides, that we planted less and harvested more because we planted the statistic that we planted was on the territory that was Ukrainian, right, under Ukrainian control. And then we harvested and we liberated some area and we harvested more. Sometimes this happened also. So that is why, yes and no. The statistics help to see the tendency and general picture. It's probably not very, very accurate, but it's pretty much.
Thank you. Any other questions before we let Antonina go?
You had one trip to Ukraine. What did you learn on that trip? And how are you keeping your courage up? It has to have been hard to be in Ukraine and not be able to go to your home. I understand that you were not able to.
Actually, it was not only me going to Ukraine. Alan was also, and other K-staters were in Ukraine. So we were working on some projects improving, aim to improve major crop production in Ukraine and help Ukraine. And I hope this project will return, and we will continue help Ukraine to restore agriculture, because this is not only about Ukraine, this is about global food security, about global market. So yeah, that was hard to see all the damages actually, and that was pretty scary, obviously.
Antonina, does your husband stay in Ukraine, or is he able to join you, or what does that situation look like?
He just recently joined me.
Good, but he's safe. Good.
And there is a question, Antonina, in the chat. If the war was to end soon, what impacts do you see happening for Ukraine and Russia?
It's a very hard question. It depends from how it will end. You know, to win and end the war, that is two different things. If it just ends and we lose the territory, it's going to be a frozen conflict because Ukraine will never recognize our territories as Russian. That is what Ukrainian people say. That is what our president says. So that is why it depends, right? So I hope we will win this war and we will return our territory back, which is our sovereign territories according to our constitution.
Thanks. Yeah, that is difficult to figure out. Folks, if you have anything else, now's the time. You can either unmute and talk, or you can go ahead and type something in the chat. Joe, I note that you're unmuted. If you want to ask a question, go ahead. Forrest, do you have anything else? You're still unmuted there.
I just wanted to say goodbye and thank you.
Thank you.
And there was one that came in the chat. What does a post-war future look like? It's kind of a little bit the same, but yeah, kind of hard to say. But go ahead, and if you have any thoughts on that.
So as I mentioned earlier, the principle of rebuilding Ukraine is build back better. So we hope that after the war will be over, Ukraine is pretty favorable country for foreign investments. And I believe that after the war will be over, we will get enough investments to rebuild our economy and return to the normal life, including agriculture, which is the major driver of our economy. So I'm hoping for better.
Cool. Thanks. Okay, it's last call, and I'm not trying to shut it off, but we will go ahead and close down if we don't have something. If you do have something you'd like to ask, go ahead and do it now.
Like, that's it.
I think it is. All right. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate you being on today. And we'll probably have another one of these sometime along the way. We don't have it scheduled. The one that we do have scheduled is Dan O'Brien. We'll have his grain market stuff on April 28th is what's next. So with that, thanks much, and glad to have you. And Antonina, you've got some greetings from Mexico from Laura Rincon.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad. I met those people here in Kansas City.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks,
Thank
Antonina. I appreciate your time too, and you
Thank
putting
you
all
very
this
much.
together.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.